Welcome, everybody, to Navigating Change, the podcast from Teibel Inc. I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here once again with...
Howard Teibel.
Happy holidays, my friend.
Yeah, happy holidays to you.
Yes.
This was... I got a great story of being in Manhattan, and having two Lubavitcher Jews run up to me and saying, "Are you Jewish?" And then basically handing me a menorah. And this was the first night of Hanukkah, and I did not have a menorah. And I looked at these guys, they're like, "Who sent you?" And I went to my hotel. I lit the candles in the hotel and blew them out right away, which is against the religion. But I didn't want to burn down the hotel. But it was one of these things that came out of nowhere.
That's pretty funny.
It was awesome.
Street side menorah rescue in New York. You never would see that coming. Let's. I'm pretty excited for this show today, Howard. Tis the season. The 2015 National Business Officers Association annual meeting is coming up, February 22nd through 25th in Boston, Mass. Blissfully, Teibel Inc. home turf.
Yes.
This year's event promises a rich catalog of appropriately placed baseball references, judging by the website, and a lineup of first-rate speakers tackling the big issues facing business officers around the country. Our very special guest today is the one and only Jeff Shields, President and CEO of NBOA, and he is here to share the story of NBOA annual meeting this year and what makes it such a slam dunk for business officers to attend in 2015. Jeff, welcome to Navigating Change.
Thanks, Pete. It's my pleasure to be here. And I think the upcoming NBOA annual meeting is more like a grand slam for business officers because we're conquering the Green Monster, which is a reference to Fenway Park. And we've got all sorts of baseball theme ideas going on throughout the meeting. And, I hear there's a pretty good baseball team in Boston, so we're just going to try and take advantage of that.
we wouldn't know.
and it's Howard's hometown.
It's so great.
We're counting on probably like a 50% uptick.
It's the Teibel bump.
It's the Teibel bump.
Yeah, I don't.
It has a name. It has a name.
The
Teibel bump. I love it. I'm counting on that, Howard.
All right.
Let's kick off, Jeff. If you could just give us a little bit of background of the NBOA and what are the big issues you're going to be tackling this year? Why is this going to be the event to hit? And such happening in February, such a great way to sort of kick off the new year.
I really like the way you think. Well, first of all, NBOA is the National Business Officers Association. We work with CFOs at independent schools across the country. Independent schools are day schools, boarding schools, prep schools. They have an independent governance structure and an independent funding model, which is usually tuition. We tend not to say private school, but the common lexicon would say it's their private schools. So we work with CFOs. They oversee HR, IT, facilities, risk management, everything that's really outside the academic education that goes on at the schools. We're a rather young organization, actually. I think that's kind of interesting to note. We were founded in 1998, so we're only 16, 17 years now. And this is probably going to be only our 10th annual meeting of business officers. So still relatively new in the association world. But Boston is going to be fantastic. We're looking for over 1,000 business officers and business operations staff, over 100 members of our business partner community will be in attendance. We've got Doris Kearns-Goodwin, who also knows something about Boston and something about baseball and something about presidential history, and she's going to be our opening keynote. And we're going to be talking about really some issues that are really critical to independent schools. Financial sustainability, the business model, HR compliance issues, blended learning and how technology is changing what's happening in the pre-K through 12 classroom, facilities, crisis management, and then, of course, our bread and butter issues, accounting, tax, finance, endowment management, et cetera, et cetera. So there's really a lot going on in 3.5 days, and business officers are going to have a great time connecting with each other, and certainly HR directors, controllers, other folks in the business operations of schools are also going to have a great time and a great reason to be there. So we're looking forward to a really outstanding event. And also one last thing I'll say is that there's a lot of independent schools in Boston. It's actually the birthplace of independent school movement. So it's pretty exciting to be there to celebrate our profession and to network with with our business officer colleagues.
I love your list of business officer duties. My kids go to an independent school here in Portland, Oregon, and insofar as you think of the business officer, he's sort of running the business and administrative side of the house. He's always out there directing traffic at pickup. There is no end to the breadth of duties that independent school business officers will take on. I love that. Many hats.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I really think when people are attracted to this profession, and really when they stay in it, and Howard knows this as well, being around business officers for a long time, I think that's what they love about it. I think they love the variety. I think the level, the expansion, or the breadth of their portfolio is really amazing, and this really attracts folks who like to solve problems, who can think on their feet, and who like to have something different happening every 5, 10,
truly,
15 minutes of the day. So they're really a great group of people.
Well, it gets to this issue that Howard and I have been talking about over the last, certainly over the last 6 months. It's this idea of, or the concept of kind of reaching across the aisle, right? And the business officer and academic side of the house in working in concert with one another, and the importance of the role of communication, strategic communication. And that gets us to Howard, to your role at NBOA this year. You are attending once again, and why don't you share a little bit about what you're going to be doing and why you see such value in this group?
Well, first of all, I have to thank Jeff for even introducing me to this organization, because that really my exposure, and I've been working as a independent consultant for 28 years, and I'd say the majority of it has been with higher ed and associations. And Jeff brought me into NBOA to do some training and some workshops. And then as a result, I started working with independent schools. And I got to tell you that what really struck me about the difference is the engagement of the senior team in a way that, one of the dilemmas that happens as you move through an organization is people being connected to mission. And when I've led events actually at independent schools, in some cases for the entire school, it didn't matter who you were, if you were in the kitchen, if you were custodial, there was a connection to mission that you could feel from everybody that provided the services, and the overlap. It wasn't like we had to work to figure out how to share duties. It was the nature of the work that you might be a finance officer, but you're also teaching, or you might be the athletic coach, but you're also doing this other role. And there's something incredibly engaging about it that until I got exposed to this, you really don't see that in higher education. And part of the reason of that is because the nature of, in some ways, you could say complexity, but it really is the breadth of, you think of a college university almost like its own city. Mm-hmm. An independent school has the kind of almost family feel that people are working in a way that you don't have to work hard to get them to connect to the mission. So what I've been doing over the last number of years is helping with thinking about these big issues and what it means to be a strategic leader. And in this particular case, at this session, Jeff, you have this organized as deep dive sessions, and they've invited me to do 2 sessions. One on a topic that I was speaking around the country around is this idea of strategic communication, how to deliver a message and to design a message that really impacts an audience, and teaching business officers who I see over and over again really appreciate being able to step back and understand how to craft a message and give them distinctions there. So that's one big topic. And I had the pleasure of having Jeff in the audience in the front row when I delivered this. It was great, Jeff.
Was that a pleasure, Howard? Having me in the front row?
It didn't make me nervous. You smiled at me.
It was one of my favorite sessions of that week. Honestly, Howard, I'm not just saying that. It was really terrific. It was at the NACUBO annual meeting this summer in July. It's a great session. I'm really excited you're bringing it to NBOA in February.
Yeah, and we're going to couple that with a decision-making model that I am writing and getting closer and closer to having a book around, a model that helps teams really understand the conversations that they're in when they're in real time so that they can make more effective decisions because they understand why they're trying to solve this problem. They have a vision for where they want to go, and they effectively can make the distinction between brainstorming and prioritizing. And the more I do this, the more I see that people in some ways are starving for that because there's so much change, Pete and Jeff, going on at the same time. And that I think people need to understand how to follow a template and work together, because often, and Jeff, I'm curious if you see this too, even in independent schools, but even in your own organization, it's so easy. You put 10 people around a table that in some ways you could find yourself almost like having 10 different conversations.
No, I think that's true. I mean, I think tying it back to what you said as far as describing the independent school environment, the culture. I mean, it is a community. You described it as a family. I really think it's a community, and business officers, their staff, there's no shortage of a commitment to the mission of their school, one by one. It's also a very collaborative environment, and it's a very polite environment. And so I think very often that is a formula for maybe having difficulty making the best decisions that the organization needs you to make. And so I think I think it'll be very helpful to have a framework, as you've described, for folks to think about and follow and adapt to their school as they think about really making. There's so many decisions, critical decisions, really. And I'm not really. I'm not trying to be overly dramatic, but the long-term financial health or financial sustainability of many of these schools is going to be decided over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yes.
And I think I feel like it's our imperative at this juncture of where we are in the independent school evolution. And I think schools are wrestling with it. That's the good news. The answers aren't easy. I think there's a lot of all the decisions are difficult ones, Howard. If you could speak to that, when all of the choices require people to give up something that they really value or they think are very important, but it's for the greater good. So these are tough decisions, and so I'm really excited about Howard being there to engage in a dialogue with individuals who always want to do the right thing. And that's the other thing I'll say about this membership. They always want to do the right thing, but very challenging times. So I'm really looking forward to that particularly.
That is such a great way to frame this challenge. And I wonder, my experience is fairly limited in terms of the breadth of independent schools that I have worked with. I spend most of my time with higher ed, but my experience is that while the business officers for independent schools that I've come into contact with are extremely talented business officers, they are not well equipped with the kinds of skills that help them tackle these complex problems that they meet in this really unique environment of this unique, as you say, community, this unique family. Where are these pain points, Howard? Maybe you could talk just for a minute about where these pain points are and where the needs really are sort of focused.
Well, it's such a big question, Pete, because whether it's higher education or independent schools, the nature of speaking across the aisle, the nature of being a administrative leader, sort of responsible for the financial viability and of the organization, and then the deliverers of the services, the teachers who are actually front and center. There is a natural tension between those who are delivering it to the students and those who are trying to sort of keep the business moving in a way that makes it more and more financially viable, more revenue and managing expenses. The tension there is really appreciating each other and really listening to the concerns of the other. And I think we're moving in a direction, both in independent schools, Jeff, your point that we're coming to a point where some big decisions are going to need to get made. And in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see some schools really thrive, many maybe continuing in some cases to limp along, and some having to rethink whether they can continue to do what they're doing, whether they merge or whatever. And I think more and more there's a greater understanding that the only way we're going to get through this is if we get board leadership, faculty. And when I say faculty, I'm talking about the people delivering the teaching and in some cases research, primarily in higher ed, and administration to come to the table and to really be saying, this is our collective problem and let's do this together, as opposed to you're responsible for this and we're responsible for something else. And I think that mindset shift around collaboration versus cooperation is taking hold, and people are recognizing we need to really learn what it means to collaborate, not just be polite and cooperate with each other. What do you think of that, Jeff?
I think you're spot on. I think we are moving in that direction. I do think that heads of schools, chief financial officers, other members of the senior leadership team are realizing that silo thinking is not only is it preventing us from moving forward, it really could be contribute to our demise. And that I think trustees, the senior leadership team, are getting together and really thinking through these big issues, these complex issues, and using all of the best thinking that's at the table. I think what they don't have, though, very often is a model or a framework on how to think through things to get to the best outcome. And so I think that's what's really valuable. And I think that's one tool that we're hoping to bring to the table. So I think that, but I do think that those that limited kind of silo thinking, we are evolving past that, and trustees and heads of schools and CFOs are really realizing that. If for nothing else, 2009 was a wake up call, and it really put a spotlight on financial issues for independent schools. And I think the schools that we're talking about, the schools that are committed to being here for decades and decades and decades, are really using that as the wake up call to bring these issues to the fore.
It's so interesting as I listen to you, Jeff, is that these are in some ways are repeated themes that you and I have heard, and I've seen your writing, and Net Assets I think does brilliant work. It's sort of shedding light into these deep dives around these different topics. And one of the things that comes to mind for me that's front and center that I'm paying attention to is this idea of what does it mean to have a certain kind of leadership mindset in the face of, in many ways, we're talking about it, and I use this language sometimes in retreats, and I'm always like, okay, is this going to play? But it's a growing up conversation, and I think that in many ways, what makes these schools experiences so appealing is they've got this kind of open-ended. It doesn't have that, in many ways, corporate feel, and I think the tension is as we continue to move towards weaving in what does it mean to be financially viable? How do we retain that feel and culture that people have bought into is why they join this, because it's not corporate. And this is the inherent dilemma, because there's a lot of natural pushback from faculty when they hear this idea about trying to assess the viability of programs against some financial metrics.
Yeah.
But the truth is, if we don't find a way of having those conversations in a meaningful way, we are ignoring some very important things that are staring us in the face. And I think that if you were to simplify why NBOA is a critical organization, why coming together once a year on these annual meetings and then regional meetings, why it's so important is because we have to, in a sense, learn the art of talking through these issues together. And it's not about having an answer. It's about discovering what are the right questions that we want to tackle and then coming together and wrestling with them. That's at the heart of what I see that you do and that I've experienced when I've sat in on NBOA sessions. It's like it really is committed people that want to figure out what should we be wrestling with here, and not so much we've got the answer that we don't have the answers. We'd be kidding ourselves if we thought we knew how we're going to get there.
That's right. And I think that's really interesting, Howard, that you would bring that up, because I think so often the culture of the independent school business officer is to have the answer. So it's really counter to how they have been successful in this role to not to rather struggle or be in conversations about getting to the solution and not immediately providing it, or understanding that that there isn't an answer readily available. That's a really that's a real twist to, again, how they are frequently rewarded and really thought of at their schools.
Boy,
that's a big shift. That's a big shift.
It's transformative, really.
Yeah.
Just transformative in terms of not just how they approach their job, but how they approach the rest of the team with which they work. And, I can't help but think that the constituent audiences that they work with, not just, staff and faculty administration, but the board, and the typically much more involved parent group than you have in higher ed, right?
Yes.
These competing signals create a lot more noise that they have to be able to parse and work through. I think, wouldn't you say, Howard, that's so much of what strategic communication really gets through?
Yeah, I mean, it really is getting to... In the end, if you think about listening to anybody trying to tell a story about what they want from you, or what they want you to take away, it's fundamentally, there's a very simple message behind it, but often we think that the detail is what people want. People want the message. And then what they want to do is find a way to engage with you in the message. And I think what business officers, rightfully so, they've got so much data, and they've got so much, sort of their whole career has built around understanding how to look at financial models. And then in many ways, they're being asked, and I'm going to be asking them to look at this idea of stepping back from the weeds and saying, what are you trying to produce in your listeners? So when you're in front of a board and you've got metrics from the last 6 months, those numbers are less important than really what are you trying to engage them in. And what I want to see more and more happening is people are willing to stop and minimally ask that question, because that question leads to engagement.
Oh, I love the way you put that. As we get down to sort of our wrap up, I wonder if you each could take a turn at this question. Let's say I am an independent school business officer, and I am attending the NBOA annual meeting for the first time. Howard, let's start with you, and then Jeff. What do I need to do to prepare myself to have the very best experience in your sessions and at the event overall?
Well, it's funny. Whenever I get up in front of a group, whether it's 10 people or 500 people, I recognize from the moment I'm starting that I'm already in some way speaking to the choir, and that I'm out. The fact that they show up is half the battle, and that what I'm looking for is a mindset. So if I'm asked to come into an organization because maybe that there are some morale issues, for example. Let's say that that's a piece of it. I'm dealing with a different kind of mindset. But when you show up at a conference like this, you are making an intentional choice to say, you know what, not only do I not know everything, I'm here to learn. So what I'm looking for people to come into my session with, at least, and I'm sure every other presenter would say this too, is an open mind. A willingness to say, I'm willing to set aside either some preconceived notions and learn some new ideas. But I got to tell you, that is the nature of how they show up. That's why this is so exciting. Is that in the times I've led events for Jeff and NBOA, the engagement enthusiasm was overwhelmingly positive. So I'll say to a group, it's not you that I worry about. It's the people that choose not to be here that really are the ones that would get value from these conversations, even deeper than those that are here. What about you, Jeff?
Oh, I love the question, Pete, and I really appreciate it. I think first and foremost, I would ask folks to come to the meeting with a learning agenda. There are so many different opportunities to learn through concurrent sessions, general sessions, gold mines, deep dives, that and really the content covers the full portfolio that we talked about at the top of the call. So I think what's really important is come with at least armed with what you're going to learn so that you're not consumed by the program, but rather you consume what you really need from the program. And just two other really quick points. Make it a point to come to the welcome reception for first-timers on the first night. It sounds like a small point, but this community is so collaborative, is so collegial, and is so connected that you'll do yourself the biggest favor of the meeting by coming into that room and connecting with people who are all first-timers like you. And you'll meet the board, you'll meet other people who are really committed to making sure that you have a really outstanding meeting. And then finally, I would just encourage everyone to ask questions because there's someone there that has the answer. They've been through it. And there's one thing that business officers do best is that they share information because they don't want anyone to reinvent the wheel if they can help them avoid it. So really come with questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I think you'll come once with that. If you do those three things, from my point of view, I think you'll have an outstanding learning experience, and you'll want to come back year after year.
I love that, and I love the way you put it. Be able to consume what you want to consume and not be consumed by the meeting.
It's a big meeting.
Yeah.
And a lot of these folks work in smaller learning environments, and sometimes that can be overwhelming, and I don't want that to happen. But we're trying to serve everybody with this meeting, so it continues to grow, and overall I think that's a good thing because it increases the brain trust that's there.
Jeff, this is we really appreciate you being on the call with us today, and it really sounds like, I mean, this is, you say it's a big meeting, but the kind of sponsorship support really lends such credibility to what you're doing. There are a lot of people who want to see this meeting be a success, and a lot of companies that really have your back clearly to make this a great event. It is the 2015 NBOA annual meeting, February 22nd through 25th in Boston, Ma. That's where you want to be in February.
Pete, can I add one thing to this before we sign off? And that is that we talked about the commitment to mission that business officers and folks that work in independent schools have. I will tell you, our business partner community shares that same commitment to the mission of these schools. And I am so grateful for that. And I think that's why they're as engaged in this meeting as they are, because they really, truly share the commitment to the mission of the independent schools they serve as well. And I really think they deserve credit for that.
Outstanding. True corporate support. It's really wonderful.
It is.
So, Jeff Shields, again, thank you, President and CEO of NBOA. Thank you so much.
It was nice meeting you, Pete. Thank you for the opportunity.
Surely appreciate talking to you. And in coming years, when you decide to have your event in Portland, I will be there.
We were in Seattle. We were very close not too long ago.
I think I ended up with a celebratory mug out of the event. I actually think I was there.
Excellent. Howard, always a pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity as well.
You're welcome.
Howard Teibel, any other news for the good people?
I actually have something. I never do. I have something I want to end with.
I am so excited about that.
All right. So, and I think it ties in nicely to this. Because
yes.
I'm preparing for leading a board workshop at a trusteeship event, and I've been thinking this morning with Gail Gregory about this, and they came across this article back in 2009 titled "Leadership in a Permanent Crisis." And it was written in July of 2009 by Ronald Heifetz, Alexander Grashow, and Martin Linsky. And this quote, I think, is as true today as it was back in 2009. Jeff, I'm curious what you think of this. And here it is. It says, give yourself permission, I'll say it again, as a leader, give yourself permission to be both optimistic and realistic. This will create a healthy tension that keeps optimism from turning into denial and realism from devolving into cynicism. Mm. And I think that this is the challenge we have today: is how do we keep our level of optimism while facing in times what I talk about as the brutal facts, but I think you can also frame it as realism. And I think business officers live that every single day, and that's what they are struggling with: is how do we bring both forward. I'm all about finding ways, helping people to bring the optimism, and I'm telling you, it's out there. So, Jeff, I got to tell you, for me personally, I love working with you and your organization just because of I walk away more jazzed from sessions with your membership than I do from most of the experience I attend. So I really appreciate the participation.
Oh, I appreciate that as well, Howard. No, I really, we're in the aspiration business. I mean, that's what independent schools provide is that aspiration of what your son or daughter can be. And I think that's you got to marry that, as you said, with the realism of the reality of our current circumstances in the current economic environment, and not an easy answer. So I thought that quote was right on point.
Well, I can't think of a better way to wrap up than that. Thank you, everybody, for downloading and subscribing to Navigating Change. You can find out more about the show at teibelinc.com. And we appreciate your kind reviews and ratings in iTunes. If you're an iTunes listener, that's a great way to help make sure that other people discover the show when they search for it. Just leaving us a nice 5-star review. We appreciate that. On behalf of Howard Teibel and Jeff Shields from NBOA, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll catch you in the new year on Navigating Change, the podcast from Teibel Inc.